Supermarket shelves are being systematically stripped. Blake Johnson begins our coverage.
Panic buying. It's spreading faster than the disease that created it.
The line to get into Costco.
It's stretched through the car park at Epping.
The entrance is all the way there.
13 new coronavirus cases in Victoria today. Mass gatherings are off limits, unless it seems you're hunting toilet paper.
Excuse me, you can go from that side.
I want to go get some for my grandma, but, it's a bit hard for her because she's a pensioner. She doesn't really go out.
We're seeing runs on fruit and vegetables now. This is Coles in Collingwood.
Everyone's trolleys had 2 of everything, so everyone's doing it. So we're all perpetuating it.
Shelves are being raided so fast, Coles has added more items to its restricted list. Paper towels, tissues, hand sanitisers, rice and pasta.
So if everyone shops as they would normally shop, there'll be plenty for everyone.
A crisis for some is an opportunity for others. This mostly $2 store slugs you $65 for a pack of 48, more than 4 times the normal price. Coles and Woolworths say staff are being abused. They're trying to keep up.
We're having regular deliveries from our distribution centres, and even some suppliers are delivering directly to stores so that we can restock the shelves as quickly as we can.
Queues outside shopping centres are being replicated outside testing centres, but there are likely people waiting who don't need to.
We don't want people with just an ordinary mild cold in Australia to go and get testing. We need to preserve the testing for those who need it.
That means only people with symptoms who have been overseas recently or have come into contact with a confirmed case. At this stage, there is no plan from the Chief Medical Officer to close schools.
The interesting aspect about schools is that children don't seem to get either much in the way of infection, or if they do, they get very mild infections.
Despite this, Xavier College will send Year 8 and 9 students home on Wednesday to trial a new online learning program.
So we're obviously into really uncharted territory with coronavirus, and I think it's going to challenge every authority, every organisation, including schools.
Geelong Grammar isn't waiting for the government. It'll close Wednesday.
We deem this to be a timely judgment with a highly precautionary emphasis.
And a precautionary strike by the New Zealand government has clean bowled the Kiwi cricket team. Tonight, they're racing home from Sydney to beat a new rule that starts tomorrow, forcing anyone arriving in New Zealand into a 2-week quarantine. The testing centre here at the Alfred Hospital has just closed for the night. It'll reopen at 8 tomorrow. A total of 49 cases across Victoria. For that reason, health authorities are no longer saying where the public exposure sites might be. But the Chief Medical Officer says if it gets worse, they can cancel elective surgeries or bring in more staff so our hospital system can cope. Mike?
Blake Johnson, thank you. In breaking news, coronavirus has hit Victoria's justice system, with courts suspending all new jury trials indefinitely. Karen O'Sullivan has live details from the Supreme Court. And Karen, this is an unprecedented move.
Mike, starting Monday, the Supreme Court and the County Court will stop all new jury trials until further notice. This means the jury empanelment process, in which hundreds of potential jurors gather in court, won't go ahead. This suspension does not apply to trials in which the jury has already been empanelled, which will continue as usual. Chief Justice Anne Ferguson says this precautionary decision was made after consideration of the latest expert health and government advice, and recognises that members of the community may hold concerns about attending court. We've been told all other Victorian courts, including VCAT, will operate as usual unless told otherwise. The Chief Justice says this is an unprecedented decision that's been made in the interests of all Victorians. Mike?
Karen, thank you. AFL clubs are being told they must drastically reduce costs to save jobs as players and executives face pay cuts. Footy power brokers spent the afternoon in crisis talks 5 days before the season begins at an empty MCG.
Sparsely attended final practice matches prepare AFL stars for empty stadiums.
Right now, round one's going ahead next week, whether it be in front of 100,000 or 0 people. There'll be 18 clubs competing and 4 points is on the line.
Players are trying to make it business as usual, according to Hawk Ben McAvoy.
Yeah, look, we're in uncharted waters, aren't we? None of us have been in this situation. So, look, it's just take it as it comes.
Round 1 will proceed with no spectators, but after that,
I think there's no doubt that there will be a disruption at some stage to the season.
it's inevitable. A player will test positive.
And when that happens, that club is going to be put in quarantine and will not be able to play.
Get your footy record!
Empty grounds, cancelled games mean huge losses for clubs.
That's going to be dramatic.
Hundreds of thousands a game?
That's probably right.
A strange hush will fall over grounds.
I've got to say, I never thought it would happen. It's going to be weird. There's no question about that.
Gates are back and racing. Weird at Caulfield too, with stands empty for the All-Star Mile meeting. And much of $100,000 worth of food, including ribeye steaks, donated to charity.
At a time like this where it's easy for the vulnerable to be forgotten, and this sends a powerful message that they're not forgotten.
The Grand Prix cancellation will trigger tough negotiations should Melbourne still have to pay its huge licence fee to Formula One.
Obviously, there'll be delicate discussions.
The list of major event cancellations and postponements is ever expanding. Too many to name them all, but among them, the Comedy Festival, the Flower and Garden Show, Run for the Kids.
I think the overarching feeling is nervousness.
And the hit musical Come From Away has been forced to close early, devastating musicians who work on the show.
Oh, I'm gutted. I'm so gutted. It's been a really tragic and scary, stressful week.
While some community sporting organisations cancelled games today, many still went ahead, but with caution. Strict ground rules for this hard-fought preliminary final.
Limit the amount of high fives, the shaking of hands. Careful about your own drinks and touching players.
Medical authorities say there's no reason to cancel community sport yet.
The Saints have come home and a new era begins.
This was footy returning to Moorabbin with the AFLW.
There's no crowd, we're waiting for the siren.
Today, no one allowed in for the Saints-Tigers game. Unprecedented times and no end in sight.
I would say right now, pretty much anything's possible.
Nick McCallum, 7 News.
Peter Dutton says he's feeling fine after being diagnosed with coronavirus. Speaking from his hospital bed, the Home Affairs Minister says doctors are only concerned about people he had contact with 24 hours before showing symptoms.
Taking no chances. Cleaners in hazmat suits disinfecting rooms at the Commonwealth Parliamentary offices after Peter Dutton's diagnosis yesterday. Today, doing interviews from his hospital bed.
I feel much better this morning, I've got to say.
Mr Dutton was in Cabinet in Sydney on Tuesday, 2 days before exhibiting symptoms. Treasurer Josh Frydenberg has since had himself tested. He's been cleared. But the Chief Medical Officer says there was no need for him, the Prime Minister or any other minister to be tested because
no member of Cabinet was in contact with Minister Dutton within 24 hours of him becoming symptomatic.
Labor says that's different to the advice given to the rest of the country.
Guidance has been given to the Australian people. Nothing here about 24 hours. Nothing.
But Professor Murphy says the 24-hour rule is the standard used by doctors and emergency rooms.
That's always been our public health advice.
Even so, Qantas has advised passengers within 2 rows of Mr Dutton on his flights to Sydney on Monday and back to Brisbane on Wednesday to seek medical attention if they display symptoms. Precautions in the US too, where President Donald Trump's daughter Ivanka was among the officials Mr Dutton met last week. That was a week ago, but the White House says Ivanka Trump self-isolated today after learning of Peter Dutton's diagnosis, but has tested negative.
I came back from the US from Washington on Sunday, and I didn't show any symptoms until really Thursday nights.
That was the night he hired handyman Brad via Airtasker to do an hour and a half's work on his home.
I had physical contact with him at the end of the evening where I shook his hand and left the house.
But Brad says he's been refused testing because he's not displaying any symptoms, now self-isolating in a bedroom while his wife and baby sleep on the couch.
I've literally got to sit here and wait for 14 days not knowing whether or not I have the virus.
As a national ad campaign launches tomorrow,
remember to cough or sneeze into your arm or a tissue,
trying to restrict the spread.